Howdy, my name is Nonat, and today I'm making an interesting video that I will admit I didn't think of myself. This was made up by my stream chat or comments, one of the two, that I think is a really interesting idea. A lot of people always ask, oh, what class should I play to fulfill this power fantasy or this character idea? But a lot of people also ask, which class is this difficult or this complex, and how much do I get out of it? Well, today I'm making a tier list? Tier graph? I don't know what I'd call it. I'm making a video about each class in the game and their level of complexity versus what you get out of it. I was gonna do a normal, like, F through S tier list, but I felt like that didn't give enough information. So today, we're using this brand new difficulty versus what you get out of it graph list. Also, this is the second video ever being edited by my brand new editor, Ray! Say hi, Ray. Don't actually use your voice. No one wants to hear you talk. Just like put a text on the screen saying hi or something. I'm probably going to be very mean to you. Welcome to your job. So unfortunately, I had to put this entire jank list together awkwardly in GIMP, so we're not going to be going in any specific order. We're going to be going in the order of which my photo editor has put the layers on top of each other. So with no further ado, starting with which, because you know, when you're talking about classes in Pathfinder, you always start with which. Let's get started. As you can see, farther to the left is easier to play, farther to the right is harder to play, higher up is more the better results you get out of the class, and lower is the less results you get out of the class. So vertically is going to be a bit more like power and flavor oriented, left to right is just the sheer complexity of the class. And starting with the witch, I'm going to put them a little bit farther to the right than the middle, but also a little bit lower. So we're going to start right in this lower right quadrant because the witch is kind of just a wizard with extra steps, or a cleric with extra steps, or a druid with extra steps, all just given a really cute magical pet. They don't really do much that the other classes can't already do. Their focus spells aren't inherently that much better than a wizard or a druid's focus spells. Sure, they get cackle so they can free sustain, and that's something that gets them a little bit of results. But overall, unless your character fantasy is to draw your power specifically from a familiar that is keeping an eye on you from a greater power patron, you're better off playing any of the other spellcasting classes. It's cool that witches can pick their own tradition, but it doesn't add that much to their gameplay. The Thaumaturge. Speaking from experience, starting out, the Thaumaturge is hard to play, especially trying to memorize everything that its exploit vulnerability does gets a little bit confusing. I've been playing one for about 4 or 5 sessions now, and I still need to double check exactly how much damage my exploit weakness personal antithesis does and stuff like that. So I'm gonna put them probably about halfway on hard to play, but their results are incredible. Even if you're not focusing on decent damage numbers, which they can pull out some great ones, the flavor is awesome. The way that their personal antithesis works means you pull out some random piece of junk that causes a weakness to your target, and this lets you roleplay in combat so well. We were fighting a kelpie, so just a seaweed fey monster, and I didn't have anything super effective against it, but I got a personal antithesis, so I reached into my pouch, pulled out a fistful of salt, and punched it with that because the salt would dry out the seaweed. You just get to get super creative with inflicting weaknesses on things, and I love it. The Swashbuckler is so easy to play with, just speaking of power, some of the highest results in the game, and I've seen this in action in my latest campaign. My friend is playing a braggart swashbuckler, and they have a very simple pattern of mechanics. They intimidate to gain panache, and they finisher. Now the target's immune to intimidate, so they tumble through, finisher. End of turn. Tumble through, finisher. Oh, they failed their tumble through? Good thing they have 3 actions so they can just tumble again before finishing. The Swashbuckler is so easy. They do so much bonus damage with their finishers. If you've got them flat-footed and they can land these hits easy, at level 1, he's been critting for 20 to 30 damage consistently. It's awesome. The Summoner, the poor Summoner, probably one of, if not the hardest to play class in the game, with so little result to show for it. You have to manage 2 characters on the battlefield while balancing only 3 actions between them, sharing hit points as well as being able to both be affected by certain effects, also sharing a multiple attack penalty. It's all just against the Summoner's favor. A lot of Summoners I've seen have ended up functioning basically like wizards casting Electric Arc every turn, and then sometimes they get to attack with their Eidolon. Couple this with their super limited 4 spell slots per day, and I'm not saying Summoners can't work wonders. They can do some great stuff, but on average, the work you put in does not reflect the output you get from the class. Sorcerer, on the other hand, super easy to play. I'd say about as much as Swashbuckler. I'd say they get almost as much as Swashbuckler. Just gonna hide behind Swashbuckler there. They're so easy to play. You pick a tradition, you pick like 4 spells, cool, you have 3 spell slots a day, you can cast any of those 4 spells up to 3 times a day total. You can just mix and match them, you're not stuck into any prepared spells. The Sorcerer, I would argue, is the easiest spellcaster in the game to play, simply because of how not punishing they are. The spellcasting of the Sorcerer is so fluid, so variable. Once you get signature spells, you're even easier and better off. They get some of the most powerful focus spells in the game, and their metamagic feats are awesome and make them super customizable without making them super confusing. Sorcerer is probably the highest result versus low complexity for a spellcaster in the entire game. The Rogue, I'm going to put a little bit harder to play than a Swashbuckler with a little bit lower no, you know what? I'll give them just about as high results as a Swashbuckler, just not always in combat. Because as a Rogue, even if you don't spec for intelligence, you're going to be trained in at least half the skills in the game. And if you do spec for intelligence for something like a Mastermind subclass, you can be trained in every single skill in the game at level 1. Not counting lores. The Rogue is not that hard to play, in all honesty. I'll actually move it down a little bit. It's not that hard to play, because all you do is get flat-footed and stab. Make the enemy flat-footed and sneak attack. That is your basic combat strategy, but the Rogue is not a combat-focused class. The real nuance comes with how you use your skills, how you balance those skills, and how you are just good at everything except combat. The Druid is almost right down the middle. Because of how flexible the Druid is and how many different builds there are, the Druid will be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. Do you just want to be an Elementalist and throw fireballs and lightning bolts? Cool, you can absolutely do that. Do you want to Wild Shape, taking specific feats and spells to unlock specific forms to use in specific situations, to use specific types of damage? You can absolutely go that complicated as well, and for that I'm going to put the Druid straight in the middle, just because it can be easy and it can be hard. I think most Druids do get good results. I'm going to put them right about there on the list. Most Druids get good results. I don't think they get Swashbuckler or even Thaumaturge level results most of the time, but they still get good results for the effort you put in. And of course, as you put in more effort, those results only go higher. The Psychic. Do I want to put Psychic all the way up here on Complex? I'm going to put Psychic right around Thaumaturge, which makes sense because they're from the same book. They are complicated to learn, which I'm going to take into account here, but they're not complicated to play. When deciding and making your Psychic character, there's a lot of reading, because every subclass not only grants you 3 unique cantrips, but also changes the effects of 2 existing cantrips, which means you need to know what those cantrips do, and then understand the changed effect, as well as the amped up effect if you choose to use a focus spell. Otherwise, they're just a spellcaster, but they make cantrips more complicated. I do think you get really good results out of it. I think the Thaumaturge is a little stronger, but the Psychic does get good results with their amped up cantrips. Again, just your subclass doubling the range of telekinetic projectile, that's already amazing result, and it only gets better from there. The Oracle. We're just gonna slide the Oracle right over here. just like off the grid. It's very low results, but the Oracle, if the Psychic's reading of the cantrips puts it that high on hard to play, reading and understanding all of the Oracle mysteries, their associated curses, their associated focus spells, all of that just pushes it nearly off the chart. And unfortunately, the results you get from an Oracle usually aren't that great. There's some powerful ones. Life Oracles are the best healers in the entire system, strictly mechanically speaking, but things like the Ancestral Oracle and the Battle Oracle just struggle. The Battle Oracle, for example, needs to cast 2 focus spells just to get their curse high enough to get them a bonus to attack rolls that puts them on par with other martial classes, but it also comes with a penalty to armor class. There's nothing the Oracle can do better than another class that doesn't come with a heavy penalty. Again, Life Oracle is like the one thing they can be the best at. Otherwise, they're incredibly flavorful, and you do get some of that flavor from the curses and whatnot, but they are so difficult to play. The Monk, on the other hand, I'm going to put about... that seems about right. They're not hard to play. You pick a stance. At the start of combat, you enter that stance. You're probably going to flurry of blows somebody, and that's about it. As you level up, you might get some key spells and some alternate abilities with your stance, but for the most part, especially in the low 1 to 8 level campaigns, it's going to be a lot of punching people, maybe kicking, depending on your stance. You can make a more complicated monk, especially if you make a key-focused monk or a monastic weaponry-focused monk. There's a lot more depth there, so it's similar to the Druid, but I would say most monks are easy to play and you get really decent damage results, because especially if you have agile fists, you're somewhat likely to hit twice per turn, and if you have a decent strength modifier, you're adding, +3, +4. Monks can do a ton of damage very simply, and I love that. You want to talk about a ton of damage? Let's talk the Magus. Personally, I want to put the Magus like here. You get really high results. It's not easy to play, but it's not hard, especially once you've picked your subclass, which is just what weapon type do you want to use. Oh, you want to use bow and arrow? Use the bow and arrow subclass. You want to use great swords? Use Indomitable Iron, I think is what it's called. And then use cantrips in your spell strike. Sure, there's a little bit of action management of spending a focus point to get your spell strike back, or just spending an action to get it back and whatnot. It's more complicated than something like a monk or a rogue, but the damage you get out of it is incredible. What I'm actually going to do to lower it a little bit, just so it's overlapping with Druid a little bit, is the risk versus reward. With that in mind, I think I'm going to put Magus dead center. If you miss your spell strike, you are a full round behind everybody else, because you need to get your spell strike back. You might have wasted a spell slot. You did nothing that last turn. It is rough for a Magus to miss their spell strike, which I think right in the middle works. At the end of the day, they're just a wizard who can hit stuff that have less spell slots, and they're also some of the highest damage in the game, and if they miss, some of the lowest damage in the game. They are the most volatile class in Pathfinder 2e, and I think putting them right in the middle makes the most sense. Investigator is a lot harder to play than the Rogue for, I think, slightly worse results. Devise a stratagem. I literally spent like 12 seconds trying to think of that. Devise a stratagem for the Investigator is a lot more complicated than Sneak Attack, Rogues just need them to be flat-footed. Investigator needs to spend an action to roll a d20 ahead of time, and then if they want to hit the target, they have to use the result on that d20, but if they do, they get to add their intelligence modifier plus 1d6 damage to the attack roll. It's a lot more, but it's also somewhat more reliable. If you roll a 5 on that d20, I shouldn't attack this turn. Sure, you had to use an action to do so, but it lets them analyze combat and be more reactionary, whereas a rogue or a swashbuckler are much more proactive. And while this is a more complicated combat style, they are much more, you get results from that. They don't quite get the high results of the rogue's insane skill proficiencies, but they're very, very close. They have more specific proficiencies, I believe, like the swashbuckler, but they don't get quite as many as the rogue. Investigator's still great. I pooped on it a lot when it first came out and called it like overly complicated and game-breaking in weird ways, but I've come around to it, and I really like the Investigator as a class. The Inventor. Similar to the Druid, it can be really easy to play if you just pick a weapon invention and give it reach or versatile, or it can be really hard to play if you pick a construct companion, giving it a specific ability to do this thing alongside all the overdrive. The overdrive mechanic existing is going to keep it on this side of the board. I think you do get decent results, especially with overdrive letting you add half or your entire intelligence mod to damage. That's a lot that you can get out of it. It's almost like a rage bonus similar to a barbarian. So I'm going to put Inventor right about here. I think Thaumaturge has a better deal. Thaumaturge basically just has a better overdrive, but Inventor does have a lot more unique abilities with their overdrive. I don't remember what the trait is. But where they make their invention basically explode to do something super cool. I don't think they're as strong as the Thaumaturge. I do think they're simpler than the Thaumaturge, and that looks like a good spot for them. The Gunslinger, really decent results. Gunslinger I'm going to put probably right... Let's put them like right next to Monk. They don't have the same level of constant reliability as a Monk, and their damage, if you're using a firearm and you just don't crit, is going to be very low. Even a sniper, if you don't crit, is only 1d8 damage. But if you crit, suddenly that's become 3d12 because of Fatal. The Gunslinger is an all-or-nothing class similar to the Magus, and similar to Spellstrike, they need to spend an action to reload. If you're using a big weapon, you might need to spend an action to stabilize it, but it's not hard. You have a gun, and you shoot people. The Fighter. What are you? Oh no, that was Ranger. Oh, this is Ranger. This is Druid. My B. The Ranger is gonna go right about here. Let's go over here. This is getting really claustrophobic, but I think this is a good example. I think this is good to show off the system, though, is that a lot of these classes aren't that complicated to play, and you get a ton out of them. The Ranger is going to be really, really close and similar to the Swashbuckler. Similar to how the Swashbuckler just needs a tumble through finisher, the Ranger just marks prey and goes to town. If you're Flurry, you're attacking with -2 multiple attack penalty. If you're Precision, you might have an animal companion, at which point you're both hitting for an extra 1d8 damage per turn. If you're critting, that's doubling. You're chunking for some of the highest base damage in the game. It's nuts. The Ranger and the Swashbuckler honestly do not play that dissimilar. The Swashbuckler just gets a little bit more damage from their feature, but the Ranger's feature doesn't have a skill check attached to it. As they grow up, they have a lot of cool options. I love that melee Rangers and ranged Rangers and even magical Rangers are all viable now. And I think you just get such insane results that Rangers are some of the best martial classes in the game. The Wizard. Obviously, spellcasting is going to be inherently complicated. I'm going to put them at a little bit lower than the Sorcerer with a little bit... I'll put them right about here. I don't think they get quite as many choices as a Druid, but I do think the Arcane spell list is just inherently stronger, at least from a purely mechanical combat perspective. The Primal spell list for Druids has a lot more roleplay opportunities, especially with some of their fancy things involving nature itself, but if you're just looking for explosions and lightning bolts and shields and darkness and stuff like that, the Arcane spell list is going to have everything you could need for every different part of combat. The reason they're so much higher in complexity than a Sorcerer is because they're a prepared spellcaster, which is inherently harder to play because you need to think about the day ahead before choosing which spells to prepare and even how many of each spell to prepare. If you have 4 spell slots, if you want to cast Magic Missile twice in that day, you need to fill 2 of those 4 slots with Magic Missile. The Champion. So easy to play, does not get anywhere near the results of the Fighter, at least just numerically speaking, but they are so simple. You pick up some heavy armor, you pick up a shield and a one-handed weapon, you walk in and you start taking hits. You know what, I am going to put them higher, not for their damage or anything, but for their ability to take hits for their allies. Especially at low levels when a lot of things will one-shot an ally, the Champion can usually take 2, sometimes 3 hits without going down. The hit point difference and then especially the armor class difference, whereas a Wizard with 14 dexterity might have a 15, 16 armor class, a Champion with a raised shield probably has 20, as well as possibly twice as many hit points. So while they don't do a lot actively, they can reactively and also passively do a ton for the party. That's the hardest part of playing a champion, is realizing exactly how you're helping. It's like that one big quote from Futurama, what is it? Cut this part out, right? Oh my god. When you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all. This goes out to every champion, including you, Andrew, if you're watching, who just attacked, missed, and raised shield. If you took a hit that turn and it missed you, or you used your reaction to reduce some damage to the rogue, you helped so much more than you know. The Bard. Honestly, Bard gets really good results. I'm going to put it about here northeast of Gunslinger, because obviously it's a spellcaster, it's inherently complicated, but it's also spontaneous. So similar to the Sorcerer, you just get to prepare whatever spells you want, or not even prepare, you just have whatever spells you want. You can cast them as long as you have spell slots, and Inspire Courage is honestly pretty simple to manage. Sure, you have to position yourself within 60 feet of your party members, but there's enough there to play with things like lingering composition and whatnot, but it's a fun class, it's simple, and you can feel good about giving your allies a bunch of buffs. The Barbarian. Barbarian is similar to Fighter. I'm going to put it right about here. It's honestly like a Fighter, you just have to rage first. I don't think it gets quite as reliable results as the Swashbuckler. I think their Precise Strike and Finisher is a little bit better than Rage, but Barbarians still get incredible results. You rage and you hit stuff. It's not complicated. Sometimes you might get some new abilities like Dragon Breath if you're Draconic, but otherwise, pretty simple, fun stuff. I just realized this was the Cleric and this was the Wizard. Cleric, amazing results. Again, I'm going to put them right up here, right above Wizard, because I think Cleric and Wizard are about equal in difficulty, just because of, again, it's a prepared spellcaster. That comes with complexity, but the fact that you just get free heal spells based on your Charisma modifier, and those heal spells are so powerful in Pathfinder 2e, it makes it so you are just the single most powerful healing machine in the game, sans maybe the Life Oracle. So the ability at level 1, where people will have between about, I think, 8 to 16 hit points, and you heal for 1d8 plus 8 on a 2-action heal, you could fully heal any level 1 character in the game. It's just so powerful. And finally, the Alchemist. Incredibly hard to play, and I won't play favorites. I don't think you get quite as much out of an Alchemist. I don't think they're useless. No class on this list is useless, but I do believe you need to put in a lot of work as an Alchemist to stay on par with everybody. Now, you can do a lot of different things, and that is a big aspect of playing an Alchemist. You can be a buffer, you can be a damage dealer, you can take advantage of elemental weaknesses, you can poison things, you can do everything regardless of your subclass. Your subclass just gives you bonuses to specific types of items, whereas the Alchemists themselves can do everything regardless, as long as they have the recipe. They have to do a lot to stay on par, but their options are super wide and open-ended. Fascinating graph here, now that we're done. I didn't expect it to look like this. Honestly, I don't know what I thought it would look like. I expected something to be in the easy-to-play low results, but honestly, so many classes are just so good in Pathfinder. I think this should be a testament to how well-balanced this system is. The fact that all but 5 classes are above average, for me at least, in the results you get out of them, makes this feel incredibly balanced. I think Summoner, and especially Oracle, could use some buffs, but even Witch, Alchemist, and Magus, they're not weak classes. They're just a little bit more complex, and they just don't do enough different to be considered super special. And you know, like Fighter and Ranger and Swashbuckler, they're all really easy to hit high numbers with, and of course, like all the prepared casters are just right down the middle, because honestly, it just makes sense. Prepared casting doesn't change from one class to another. They're all pretty much equally complex with different spell lists, and they're listed basically by power of the spell list, except the Cleric, who just gets a bunch of free heals per day, which is nuts. Again, getting 5 extra spell slots at level 1 just for healing is unmatched if you can manage to have an 18 charisma. I guess 4 typically, because you'll have a 16 if you want. But there we go. There's my list. Let me know. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Tell me in the comments below. What class do you think is the most complex versus the least complex? What do you think is the most results, the most bang for your buck class compared to their complexity? I want to hear from you. I also want to give a huge shout out, to my new editor, Ray. Thank you so much for coming on the team. We're happy to have you. Comments, leave really nice comments about Ray to boost their ego and their self-esteem. I'm sure it would be really nice to be welcoming as a community, because Lord knows I'm going to be obscenely cruel and mean to them in 90% of these videos they have to edit. Shout out also to my patrons for supporting the channel and helping me keep the lights on. I hope you all have been enjoying these videos lately. I'll be getting to the Psychic Guide soon, I believe. If this comes out this week, it'll be next week. Luckily, I'm not dating this, so if Ray takes a while editing this week still means this week. Fun. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, no nat ones.